Hamilton is driving with Ferrari in Barcelona and crashes into a wall. Bortoleto is also driving on the same track with Sauber, starting strong and doing really well. Adrian Newey pokes at Red Bull and says they only paid attention to the car's problems when Verstappen started losing the championship last year. The FIA keeps firing people, and Johnny Herbert, a former Formula One driver, is the latest to be dismissed from the panel of commissioners. The GPDA, the Drivers' Association, responds by saying that we were not consulted about this either, nor about the penalty system which was announced last week. Kimi Antonelli now has a driver's license. The rookie driver who will race for Mercedes alongside George Russell is already a licensed driver. Ford versus Ferrari, Part 2. A giant American manufacturer announces its entry into the WEC and will make a hypercar to compete with everyone, including against Ferrari. In the same week, McLaren indeed says yes. Is currently looking at the WEC and IMSA with interest. But for now, just interest. Speaking of endurance races, especially IMSA, look who I talked to today. I'm going to ask how the expectations are to kick off the IMSA Championship in the best possible way for 2025. Friday, January 31st, 2025, the first month of the year. Is it over? So, sit down, let's get into our news. Lewis Hamilton was on the track with Ferrari this week, on Tuesday and Wednesday. He logged more kilometers with the 2023 car and had his first off-track excursion and crashed. There are no images available, neither photos nor videos, at least for now. Since the test was a private session, over there was only the Sauber car. Bortoleto should know a bit about this. We'll talk about him in a bit. From the little information available, we know that it happened in the last sector of the lap, possibly in the last corner. There was damage to the suspension and aerodynamic parts. Hamilton had already driven on Tuesday, and the accident happened late Wednesday morning. That day, Charles Leclerc and Antonio Giovinazzi, the Ferrari driver in WEC, were still scheduled to drive, which is the reserve driver for the Formula One team. What we know is that next week, Hamilton will be back in the car. Back in Barcelona on the 3rd and 4th to log more mileage. I commented on Twitter, and I'll explain here too. This doesn't mean much. It's not like it's a disaster that Hamilton is underperforming, expected from a 7-time champion who should be retiring and so on. It's not that he crashed because he's really good and is pushing. He's not pushing the limits of the car. No, nobody is pushing the limits of the car. With the tires, which are not the tires that are normally used, those are called Academy tires, tires for the kids. That comes from Formula 3 and Formula 2 to accumulate mileage A. But he is from Formula 1, yes, but the rules are the same. I've explained before that these tests are to adjust the position for fading the buttons on the steering wheel, the seat, the pedal box, and so on. In addition, of course, they naturally have the role of acclimating the driver, the team, to the engineers. And everyone needs to understand their way of working so they don't just drop in out of nowhere during preseason with only a day and a half in the car. I even made this analogy on Twitter, explaining that it's like starting a new job. On the first day, you don't know where the printer is, you don't know where the bathroom is, you don't know where the restaurant is, because everyone eats well and cheaply. It's a torment. It's the same thing in a completely new Formula One team after being with the other one for over 10 years, having to get used to the mechanics and engineers in a language you don't speak. Anyway, everything is different. It's important to accumulate this mileage. Also, this mileage of conversation. Also there in Barcelona, and without making much noise, we only found out after the tests were over. Gabriel Bortoleto drove the Sauber car. I even grabbed some images from Instagram of Bortoleto himself while he was practicing starts there on the straight of the Circuit de Catalunya. The same conditions that I mentioned about Hamilton apply to Bortoleto. He's not driving this year's car, which hasn't been launched yet and isn't ready. And the goal, also for the Brazilian rookie, is to accumulate mileage. It's about understanding the car better, the driving position, the steering wheel, and how the team works. That adds very little. In terms of performance reading, if you go a 10th faster, quickly, being a 10th slower than Hülkenberg doesn't mean anything at all. I've already explained in this video that from now on, for the Brazilian fans especially, a new phase begins, and it's time to moderate expectations. He's taking on a car that was last year the worst team on the grid by far. And I've also mentioned the non-news from last week when Hülkenberg was asked if it would be a lie. Bortoleto's mentor, he said, "I don't think you have to be a mentor to anyone. In the end, we are competitors." And this indeed reached Brazil for several channels like, my God, truly a vendetta, a threat. We have a friend, for God's sake, right? Adrian Newey poked fun at the X. Exactly. The wizard of the drawings, who will take on a role as a partner responsible for the technical side at Aston Martin starting March 1st, talked about Red Bull. The interview was given to the German portal Automotor Unsport. And he said, "Since the end of 2023, we had already noticed some things with the car, making it increasingly difficult to drive. This affected Perez more and Verstappen less. And they only started paying attention within Red Bull when I was already leaving and Verstappen started losing the championship." Newey, you might remember, announced his departure from Red Bull. Red Bull announced his departure from there, which is May 1st, 2024, in what he considered to be a lack of courtesy. Since that day marked the 30th anniversary of Ayrton Senna's death, which for Newey has a special significance. After all, it was in a car that he did it. It was a measure from Red Bull when the secret was already leaking from all sides and finally resolved the discussion. From then on, Newey was increasingly distant from the race car, the RB20, and he commented on that too. "I could do very little. It was left to the rest of the engineering team. And I think they don't have that much experience." No, which seemed like a jab at Pierre Vacher and his disciples. Vacher, technical director, inherited Newey's position for all sims. And he is the one responsible, at least responsible for the entire technical team now at Red Bull. And Newey concluded by saying, "They went in a direction of development when it was already clear that it wasn't the way to go." Another shakeup in the FIA's body of commissioners. This time, it was Johnny Herbert who stepped out. The former Formula One driver who raced between 1989 and 2000 and even won a race with Stewart. Remember? That wasn't his only victory. He won 2 more with Benetton. He was part of the body of commissioners that judge disciplinary issues, the penalties for track limits and so on. And he was dismissed by the federation on the grounds that he is holding incompatible positions since he works in broadcasting for a channel in England. And he is also a commissioner. So, at the Mexican Grand Prix, the commentator in the broadcast booth criticized Max Verstappen's driving. Remember when he pushed Norris off the track? That's right. And the FIA used that to justify his dismissal. I think this perhaps has more to do with Herbert being an unwanted figure for Ben Salem and his crew. Since the current FIA president took office, a lot of people have left for various reasons. And apparently there's a purge. Anyone who doesn't agree with how the band plays is put in the picture. Kimi Antonelli is now successfully qualified. He posted a photo on his stories that said, "Mission accomplished" in English inside a car from the Guida school, which is the driving school in Italy. The young driver turned 18 in August. He already has the super license, and he still didn't have the driver's license from Italy. I wonder what they call a driver's license in Italy. Shall we look? Guida license, which is the driver's license in Italy. Antonelli is making his debut this year with Mercedes, alongside George Russell. He hasn't raced in any Grand Prix yet. He's a young prospect that Toto Wolff believes in a lot. The Mercedes boss is traumatized for having lost Max Verstappen early on when there wasn't a position to offer him. Because at Mercedes, they had Hamilton and Rosberg as the main drivers, along with 2 young drivers coming in, Esteban Ocon and Pascal Wehrlein. Not having anything to offer, he had to tell Jos and Max Verstappen, "You guys are going to have to do something with your lives." And they did. They knocked on Helmut Marko's door, and the rest is history. There are a lot of people who understand this business and who work close to the world of the tracks. They say Antonelli is the next Verstappen. This time, he'll have the car, the mindset, and the time. To show this, Ford versus Ferrari, part 2, the enemy now is someone else. So, Ford announced its intention to enter in 2027 with a hypercar. With no rumors beforehand, it will join a grid that by 2027 will have, let me read so I don't forget, Porsche, Peugeot, Toyota, Ferrari, Aston Martin, starting this year Cadillac and BMW, and from 2026 Hyundai with its high-performance brand Genesis. It's definitely a golden moment for endurance. I really like them. I think these endurance races are amazing. And this doesn't happen at the expense of Formula One, as both can coexist, both full of manufacturers. As I give you the text for this part, I indeed had the following thought. Will Ford's hypercar use the engines made in partnership with Red Bull powertrain? It makes sense, after all, in the WEC, they use engines with energy recovery, turbo, and so on. Speaking of endurance racing, those who are indeed looking at IMSA and WEC with interest is McLaren. And it was Zach Brown who commented during the 24 Hours of Daytona weekend saying, we race in Formula One, in Formula E, in Extreme, and we're also looking at IMSA and WEC. The question remains whether McLaren would come with the LMGT3, a street-legal McLaren prepared for racing. Or would they make the technical and financial investment and produce their own hypercar? The question is valid. And still taking advantage of the moment, since we're talking about IMSA, I asked a few questions to the winner of the 24 Hours of Daytona. This Friday morning at the event, Christina, you nailed it several times there at the Daytona 24 Hours. The year starts off on the right foot. Christina, I ask you how the expectations are to start the IMSA Championship in the best possible way for 2025.
Look, 2025 started off in the best possible way. It's amazing to achieve something like this, to win a race consecutively at the level of the Daytona 24 Hours. The 20th victory for Porsche at Daytona in this iconic event. It's already my third one in my career. In Daytona, also representing Porsche Penske Motorsport. It was an incredible finish, intense, an amazing race. And I think that it's already an extra motivation for the team, starting the year with a win. I think that raises the motivation, the level of knowledge within the team. I think that already sets, in a way, the pace for the year. But at the same time, we know there's a lot of work ahead. We have another big race to win this year, which is the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So being very aware and realistic about this, we have to keep working. These races we do throughout the year, the next one being the 12 Hours of Sebring. It's also another race for us to digest this information, knowing how to improve the car. And it's always a test to see if the car will have any mechanical failures. Obviously, we want to come out of this unscathed, but it's always a test for the upcoming races, right? And another quest for a championship in the IMSA has begun. I'm already chasing my 4th title in the championship, representing Stuttgart in the car, which is a great partner of ours. So I can't wait to continue with the next stages of the championship.
Endurance is that very cerebral thing, having to think about the whole race, a 24-hour race. But there you mentioned we had a finish that felt like a sprint race in GP2. You know that thing very well. Last half hour, Ali, let's go all out. How is it to switch that switch in the driver's brain? Because you came from single-seaters. You had to rework the software in your head. Then all of a sudden, you have to wake the beast up again. Right.
Totally. They're two completely different styles of racing, right? In endurance, you have to manage the car, the brakes, the fuel, the tires. Normally, you have to make the tires last for 2 full stints. So it doesn't help to do a super long first stint and wear out the tires. But that finish, we were ready for it, to give 100% of everything, of the driving, of the car. And it was amazing to take that first position and just thinking about opening a gap, having a difference from the other cars and crossing that finish line. It was one of the most incredible moments. It's something I've been facing in my career.
You mentioned the other very important race we have coming up. I was actually going to ask you if that's the next goal, and to think that we have a golden moment. In endurance, because today we actually have confirmation that Ford is also coming with the hypercar. I saw it, really cool. In 2027, you have other competitors in the WEC at the 24 Hours of Ferrari who have already won the last 2 years. So what's your mindset like to face these beasts, right?
Without a doubt, Le Mans is one of the toughest races to win. Just by the very dynamics of the race, it's a 14-kilometer circuit with high-speed sections, low-speed sections, and fast corners. So being able to optimize the car is crucial in this race. In fact, we're working towards that. We've seen a significant improvement every year that we've gone to Le Mans since 2023, 2024, now 2025. We've seen an evolution in our performance. And just like you mentioned, Ferrari and Toyota have dominated these last few years in the sport. So we have to keep working, but I don't see why we can't fight for that victory. That's our main objective. It's ours. I think what's missing from the list of this project is to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. For me, on a personal level, for sure, it's a race that no Brazilian has won in the main category yet. But representing Porsche Penske Motorsport would be a grand achievement. Definitely, right? I think it would be even more amazing after winning Daytona. But let's go. Let's keep our feet on the ground. There's a lot of work ahead. We have the 12 hours of Sebring coming up, which is a race that we can have a sense of the car as well. Where? Performance. So everything that comes now is in preparation for the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Next up in Sebring, we have Gabriel Bortoleto making his debut in Formula One. Jumping to the team where you wrote your story, I always tell people, the best debut of a Brazilian in Formula One is yours, with that 5th place in Australia. He will also make his debut in Australia, also from Sauber. And it's a team moment that, despite coming from a big manufacturer, can also be related to yours, because it was the worst team on the grid last year. How do you see this from the outside? But do I already extend the state from the inside? How do you see it?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Gabriel for the opportunity he's getting to debut in Formula One. He deserves everything he has achieved so far, and really, did you speak the truth? The team is going through a transition period. He didn't have a significant performance last year, so a lot of calm, a lot of caution. For him, I have no doubt that it's an opportunity for him to learn in the world of Formula One. The technical part, knowing how to deal with the team, lead the team, learn from the teammate, who is a very experienced guy. So it's about him really being able to absorb all of this, because it will provide him with valuable learning and he will be able to evolve very quickly. We know he has the talent, and it's a combination of factors. I think the main thing is to know how to align the expectations of what to expect from the team. It's a team that is going through a transformation. It's under new management. It's still not one of the most competitive cars. So if everything is aligned and he can still deliver within his work, I think that's the right path.
This week, actually, technically considering last week, on Sunday, the first part of the interview with Ayrton Senna's Formula One photographer Keith Sutton was released. This Sunday, now comes the second part. Don't worry if it's subtitled. On Tuesday, the story of 20 negative records that some drivers carry and probably don't like to remember. There's Andrea de Cesares, with the highest number of retirements. Al Pizzi, a Canadian who was disqualified for being too slow in a race in '69. There's Jenson Button taking a 70-position grid penalty in 2015 in Mexico. There's Nico Hülkenberg with a record that's still ongoing and has never made it to the podium. Martin Brundle, who never led a lap. Even Fabi, who got 3 pole positions and never completed any of those poles in front, at least for 1 lap. Anyway, I think you're going to like it. I'll leave the link down below in the description. On Wednesday, the little big story, maybe the best little big story of all these years, creating this event, the Indoor Formula One Championship. Yes, this happened during the Bologna Motor Show between 1988 and 1996, competing in an elimination system in a shopping mall parking lot in Bologna. There was Christian Fittipaldi, there was Rubens Barrichello, there were Minardi cars, there were Osella cars, there were Lotus cars, Fondimetal cars, and Andrea Moda cars. I'm going to ask the editor to put some clips of those wonderful scenes here.
And 55, Alboreto lost time before sharing with the painter Cota, and then he wasted those 2 seconds we talked about earlier, which was after the first turn. The time obtained in the first segment, and unfortunately notice that Alboreto, now in the square, is clearly at a disadvantage.
And a spoiler, on Tuesday comes the part 2 of that review about the Ayrton Senna series, talking about 11 more things that the series doesn't mention, which are really important to know more about the character. Ayrton Senna in completeness. Completeness is fancy, huh? The first one had 17, the second will have 11 more, because you all sent in a lot of questions, but you're not going to talk about that. So we're talking then. So leave a like because it's free. It doesn't cost anything, you know, and it really helps the channel. Break it for me. Break this for us, and I also ask you to share your hype with us. This tool is meant to show the blessed algorithm that you like the channel, you like the videos, you like our work. In 2024, there were 880 pieces of content posted here for over 40 million views. To receive notifications for each of them, we have notification channels, Telegram, WhatsApp, and also our broadcast group on Instagram. Links down below in the description. Speaking of social media, so here are the handles for the channel's Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok, where there's content all the time. And we also have my personal Instagram, Rodrigo_Splash and Go, with behind-the-scenes footage, the event I'm going to, the drink I'm having, the outfit I'm wearing, the new gear I got, etc. I don't think my life is interesting enough to post, but I do post, you all give likes, so it must make some sense to someone. The invitation is made. So, since it's Friday, those who have been here longer already know, checklist in hand. Thanks. That hug, it's Friday. And I apologize.